Hi, nice to meet you all. The presentation we're about to go through and talk about is analytics for everyone, the idea of unleashing your data potential. Hopefully that's what you were here to say. Go ahead and do a brief introduction on myself. My name is Brendan Aldridge. I work for the City College of Chicago as the Executive Director of Data Warehousing. I've been doing IT for about 20 years, but specifically running data warehouse, business intelligence, and analytics teams for about the last 14 years. I've had an interesting sort of cross-industry experience in my career so far. I've spent 6 years working for the Walt Disney Company in their internet division where I ran their BI team, a few years out at Travelers at their corporate headquarters in Connecticut, as well as a telecommunications company, J2 Global, and Demand Media in Southern California is a new media content creation company. What I'm doing at City College of Chicago, and by the way, I should probably mention a little bit about City College of Chicago in case you're not familiar. City College of Chicago is actually the largest community college district in the state of Illinois. We're one of the largest in the country. We have about 5,800 administrators, faculty, and staff, and we educate about 120,000 students per year across our 7 independently accredited colleges, 6 satellite facilities, our culinary school. We have 2 owned and operated restaurants. We've got a public television and a public radio station, as well as 5 child development centers, a center for distance learning, and the Workforce Institute. By the way, all of that is located within the city limits of the city of Chicago. So it's been a kind of a fun organization to be working with. You know, just to start off, this idea of think differently, you know, with the Innovators Award presentation that we had received this year, I wanted to kind of start here. So this is kind of a new pivot for me on this presentation, so I just wanted to kind of explore it a little bit. So the idea of think differently is, you know, how do you even start the process? You know, experience is part of it. Knowing what can be done helps you figure out what's new and what are the new ways that you can be doing things. But also there's this idea of having a willingness to expose yourself to new ideas. Sometimes you can do that at conferences like this one. Sometimes you can do it by talking to peers that are in other industries and finding out from them sort of how are they tackling the same kinds of problems that you're facing with what you're doing. Culturally is interesting, even seeing how things are done in different countries. Actually, I've got a funny story about that. About 8 years ago, my wife and I were going and visiting some family in Ireland. It was in a little town called Man. It was over on the Galway on the west coast of Ireland. About the only reason you know about it is about 8 kilometers away from Mam Cross. And the only reason you might know about that is because that's where the house that John Wayne lived in The Quiet Man, was located. But as we were there, a bunch of the family members all went down to this local pub / gas station / grocery store, and we were having rounds of drinks one night. And it was my turn. So I'd gone up to the bar and I'd ordered a round of drinks, and I went to go hand my credit card to the bartender, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't take that." My credit card? He goes, "Well, I've already put the machine away." I said, "Tom, I don't have any cash on me, I just have the credit card." He said, "That's all right, you come back and you pay me tomorrow." Being raised in this country, you know, next morning I'm up, I'm driving, I'm finding an ATM, I'm heading back. 11 a.m. the bar's open again already. And I walk in, there's a woman behind the bar. And I said, "Hi, you know, I left a tab with Tom last night that I'd like to settle up." And she goes, "All right, love." And she goes into the back and she must be looking through the tabs of half the town. And she finally pulls one down, she starts laughing. And she comes out and she goes, "There you go." I said, "This one's mine?" She took it back from me. She said, "I think it'd have to be, because Tom wrote on the back of it, 'This one's for the Yank.'" But that idea of trusting your customers, I mean, when was the last time you walked into a Dunkin' Donuts and said, you know, "I'll be back, I'll pay you tomorrow"? It just doesn't happen as much here. But let's pivot that a little bit. Now let's talk about not necessarily trusting your customers. How about trusting your employees? I'm going to tell you about something that 96% of the companies and organizations within the United States are doing that's the same in the way they use data, and they're wrong. All of the companies, you may find this common within the organizations and institutions that you're working with, is they typically all have these small groups of data specialists. You might be called researchers, data analysts, data warehouse guys, business intelligence guys, reporting guys. It's this small group, and what their responsibility is to go in and work with all the data, interpret it, analyze it, figure out what the questions are that need to be answered, and then handing off reports and analytics to every other part of the organization. That was what, at City College of Chicago, when I arrived there 2 years ago in order to build a new data warehouse and a business intelligence system, we wanted to tackle, because we wanted to see if it was possible for us to create a system that we could open up to everybody. How about a system in which all 5,800 employees could log in directly? That not only when they logged in directly, they had information that was intuitively available to them, that was relevant to them, that they could easily understand, and that they could interact with. That was OpenBook. Now, there's this idea of data regimes, and so when I talk about opening up data to everybody, and you talk about how most organizations use data, you could classify them much like governmental systems. Data dictatorship, that's where most of the companies are in the country today. You've got a relatively small group of guys, asymmetric distribution of the data, and it's based on how senior you are within the organization, at least in terms of how fast you get the data. Now with big data and all the big data tools and technologies coming around, now you've got this new data aristocracy that's happening, where you have these data scientists, highly educated, very specialized, working with tools that are not very mature in order to be able to work with the data. So they've got all the knowledge, and then they may share it with you. Now data anarchy goes the other direction. So now we're saying, okay, so what happens when you tightly control the data? Well, people start taking data into their own hands. You build shadow IT systems. I've been getting these data extracts from IT, and I'm just going to build my own access database, and I'm going to use that to answer all the questions that I have. But what we wanted to really get to was this idea of a data democracy. How could you do it so that everybody would get timely and equitable access to data? The line of business users are empowered, they own the data, the executives and IT, and by the way, I work in the IT department, get out of the way. I love this quote. Bryce Maddock, who's the CEO of TaskUs.com, said humans are not an important part of utilizing data. They are the single most important part of the process. See, especially those of us in IT, how many, by the way, of everybody in the room is within an IT area, within their organizations? In IT, we've got so many tools and technologies to play with. We've got our traditional databases and business intelligence tools. We've got the whole new array of big data tools and NoSQL databases. If you've been following some of the cutting edge stuff they're doing now with relational streaming and incremental analytics, we've got all of these things just in the data side of the world to play with, that sometimes it's really easy to forget about the people. I was at a conference last year, which I won't share the name of, so as not to give them a bad rap, but the conference was focused on what people were doing that was really kind of cutting edge and innovative in the world of business intelligence and data. Really frustrating experience, because presenter after presenter would get up and they were talking about regular stuff. They were talking about what they were doing. And what it essentially boiled down to was, we're doing what they ask us to. Now, with the idea of a data democracy, for me, that's table stakes. Doing what people need you to do, that's just getting started. Now let's take it a step further. OpenBook. This is a little blurb from our marketing department. So when we actually did I spent 3 months at the beginning of this project working my way around all 7 colleges, talking to hundreds of different people, wound up with about 300 primary stakeholders on the project. We even put out, when we thought about naming the system, we put out a survey and a contest to have people talk about the suggestions and see which ones that they liked. OpenBook was our winner, and this was the marketing blurb that we shared with them about what for us OpenBook meant. But it's that idea of transparency, equality, and data democracy. Being able to use that for knowledge, insight, learning, and understanding. Having everybody be able to get into and use this system in a way that made sense for everybody, no matter where they were starting on the technology curve. So what I really want to do, and this is all kind of a build-up to this, is share a few ideas with you. And there's about 5 of them in here. They're not specifically what we did in order to help enable a data democracy at City College of Chicago. But they're the ideas we dealt with and grappled with that could be the ideas that you might be able to leverage, taking back to your organizations. Because a data democracy, it's not one tool. There's not one thing you can say, well, if we implement that, everybody can use the system. For us, there were about 5 at least that were the top things that we had to deal with. So the first one, connect everyone. It's harder than it sounds. Have you seen the licensing costs on some of these software packages? You know, the advantage being is when you go and negotiate with these companies, there's a lot of different ways to tackle these licensing issues. There's site licenses, there's concurrent user licenses. We're actually using Microsoft SQL Server, and we found an academic priced plan, we didn't even have to negotiate it, where we licensed all 5,800 employees to use the system for $20,000 a year. That was it. So that was our beginning on how we wanted to start, by making sure that everybody could get into the system. Now second, and this is maybe a little bit more, is making sure that you have the right data for everyone. But what that means is that you've got to make sure that each person has the right data. We did a approach that when people in the City College of Chicago, when they log into the system, the universe of data that they're seeing is immediately tailored to who they are. So if you're a faculty member and you log into the system, you still have access to the full array of tools that are available within OpenBook. But your universe of data is all of your students that you're currently teaching or have ever taught. If you're working at the department level, it's all the students that are currently taking classes or have ever taken classes in your department. Same going to the college level, into the program levels with adult education, continuing education, making sure that no matter who you were, when you got into the system, you didn't have to go find your data. It wasn't all data for everybody, but it's the right data for each person so that they recognized it. They got in, they said, oh, okay, I know these kids. That made a lot of sense for us. More controversial, static reports are dead. There's a lot of different guys out there that are talking about different ways to get rid of reports. You know, there's some guys out there talking about, we don't need reports anymore, we just need alerts. Yeah, but who's figuring out what the alert should be set to? Some guy who's working with the data and probably building reports. So when we tackled this, it was, you know, we've got this issue where every time we build a report, we spend a couple of weeks maybe working with a part of the organization, figuring out what they want, defining it specifically, building a formatted report, getting them to buy off on it, saying, okay, that looks good. What happens 6 months down the road? Well, they want to change it. Well, hey, could you add this new measure over here? Could you maybe rechange this calculation a little bit? We've evolved the way we're looking at our data, so we need you to update the report to reflect that. We use, in our reports, every single report with an OpenBook that you open up can be changed by dragging and dropping. You can drag rows into columns, columns into rows. You can bring in new rows, new attributes. You can bring in new filters. Everything is drag and drop within the system. And then once you created the report that works for you, you can save it, and now you're the only person that can see that report. You can maybe share it with other people in your department or within your groups. But that for us was helping to tackle that question of, if we're going to get IT out of the middle, how do we really get us out of the middle? We can't do it. If they're always going to have to come back to us to get changes to their reports, there's absolutely no way that we're going to be able to get out from the middle and slow people down in terms of getting the data they need. But if you do these interactive reports, now not only can they answer the questions they have today, but they can very easily answer the questions they have tomorrow, next week, next term, next year. So this was really great, and our folks responded to it very positively. Getting everyone on the same page, harder than it sounds. You really have to, especially when you take a look at faculty and you take a look at staff and you take a look at the IT folks and the non-IT folks, take a look at the executives who like to think that they're IT folks. You know, in a lot of cases, you're having to start with a lot of people that are coming from a lot of different starting places in order to figure out, what am I looking at? So we not only brought our data dictionaries into OpenBook, we integrated them into every report. Every report you use, you pop up a little footer on the bottom and you've got a mini data dictionary that you can search in and read full definitions with definitions for the values within that attribute, as well as examples and other similar terms. So this way, no matter who you were, you could always be sure. When I was at Disney, there's a great example. I was in a room with 4 vice presidents, finance, product, sales, and marketing. And this was in the online division, so we were talking about sales. And I asked them, I said, what's a sale? Of course, the marketing guy said, when we're talking about like an online, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, and he said, well, as soon as we get that credit card at the beginning of their 30-day trial, that's a sale. And the product guy said, well, no, that's not exactly true. It's really when they get to the end of that 30-day trial period and we're going to bill them that it's a sale. And the sales guy said, no, I understand this better. I pay commissions. It's when we send the credit card off to go get processed. And the finance guy says, you guys are crazy. It's only when we get confirmation back that we billed the credit card successfully that it's a sale. And for the first time, these 4 vice presidents looked at each other and realized that they'd been using the same word to each other and not understanding what the other person meant by it for years. Bringing the data dictionaries online, bringing them into the system, making sure that they're available within each and every report helps to alleviate that. And then finally, the show me how. It's great to provide a system. You can make it as easy as possible. We have a very minimalistic design aesthetic. But ultimately what it comes down to is, great, now how do I use it? How do I get 5,800 people into training classes? How do I get 3,500 faculty members into training classes without paying salaries for that hour? You can't. So what we realized is we had to build our own training videos. So we spent a few months during the process of building the system where we brought in a couple of student workers and they created training videos on how to do things with the system. They picked it up very fast. They created the videos. They were film production students. And I'm not going to say that our videos are sort of Scorsese-like, but they get the job done. They do a great job at it, and the kids had a great time doing it. We've got, at the moment, probably about 30 or 40 different 3 to 5 minute training videos that are live within the system, and the ability to customize them. So that if we do a training video for faculty members, we can set it so that only faculty members who are logged in see it. Or if it's for administrators, because it's a budget kind of planning report, we can set it so that only the administrators can see that video. So it's very customized from that standpoint. So we talk about think differently. Apple had the think different, and it was a great slogan. But think differently really is, how do we take the tools that we use, the databases, the database technologies, the business intelligence technologies, the analysis services, and the cubes, how do we take all of these tools and make sure that we don't forget about the people? That we use them not for the sake of what they can do for us, but what they can do for everybody. If we're focusing on providing analytics for everyone, and it takes how to provide them, how to get ourselves out of the way, how to make it easy for them, how to make sure they know how to use it, and then give it to them. So for us, that's been great. So that was something that we had a lot of fun with. It's something that my bosses were fairly happy with. So it was a great experience. And I think that's all I have. Any questions? Yeah.
So you mentioned that it was on a SQL Server. What is the thing that you're exposing out? Is it also like reporting services or something in there?
It's a custom web front end. So when we first began, and by the way, I have to tell you, and I'll explain how this happened, this entire project was built by 3 people in 10 months. And it started because we partnered with a company called Zogotech down in Austin, Texas. Zogotech has been working with a lot of colleges. They've deployed data solutions at about 50 different colleges across the country over the last 10 years. What I loved about working with them is when I came to them and I said, okay, data democracy, and they said, what? And I said, here's what I want to build. And over the course of 10 months, we worked together and we built them. So a lot of these features that we talked about today, for example, practically none of them existed within their base platform when we began working with them. So it was so basically it is a custom front end. The interactive reports are based off of a web-based OLAP browser. We've got a couple different sides, so on aggregate you can use that against a set of analysis services cubes, and then we've got a student navigator, all custom code, where you can do dynamic filtering on actual groups of students. We even built in on that one some table filters. You can use any attribute in the system to be able to refine those groups, and even put in a SQL query filter, so that if we provide them with SQL or if they have SQL, they can drop the SQL in and use that to bring up a custom list of students.
Is it 2012?
It is 2012. So we've been looking at 2014, but I figured I'd wait just a little bit. Any other questions? Yes?
So the average user doesn't have to know SQL code?
They don't. Yep. In fact, what we call the table filters in Student Navigator, we made them even easier than that. So when you pull up any of the attributes, like if you pulled up college, it dynamically says, okay, well, here are the 7 colleges. Which one did you want? Or which 2 or 3? If it's a yes/no, then it actually gives them a yes/no drop-down. So they don't even have to populate the values. In fact, even if we do give them a type-in box for typing in a value, we get them live examples out of the data as to what the values in that attribute look like. Yes?
Is it web-enabled for the mobile phone, or are you playing a mobile app?
Not yet. And that's the one sort of thing that we've got to still sort of do on this. You know, because it was fast and it was relatively easy for us, the particular web-based OLAP browser we're using is the old Office web components. We're looking at a few different companies that we've been working with in order to replace that. But that's really what's keeping us from being able to go fully HTML5 and kind of get the mobile app working. Yes?
Do you have a security awareness program and data classification? Because, of course, markets debate what people do once they have data democracy.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We're still discovering it, to be honest. We do have a group that's responsible for owning different aspects of the data. The researchers also take a big part of that. Excuse me. We don't necessarily have a security role per se. With our new budget year that just started, our CIO just added in an executive director of information security. So we're going to be bringing that in and seeing how we can layer that into the tools that we've got. Yes?
I think I have a similar question. How do you navigate the compliance issues and data owners and corporate issues and so forth?
I'll be honest with you, we did interpret FERPA a little more broadly than some do. You know, FERPA doesn't tell you only these people in your organization can use it. What they do say is that every person that uses it must have legitimate academic interest. Not all of our employees. So there's about 600 of our employees. Some of them are student workers. They have no access to the system. Roles that are not even closely student-facing or student-responsible, janitorial, for example, tool shop, you know, workers, they don't have access to the system. So, but we did classify about 5,000 of our employees as being either student-facing or student-responsible. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much. My information's on the screen. Please feel free to connect in with me on LinkedIn. You can also follow me on Twitter, and I hope to hear more from you guys in the future. Thanks.